The next section is the Harvest Presets section. This is where you can go to edit or create new harvest presets. These are the presets that you select when you are setting up a model harvest in the Harvest Tasks portal, and they determine what kinds of information you are going to extract from that model and bring into your database. So the way that this page is set up is that here at the top left, there's a drop-down menu where you can select any of the pre-existing harvest presets. You could also select this button to create a new preset. I'll show you that in a moment. And this button to delete this preset that you're selected on. And then down below this drop-down menu, you'll see all of these categories. These are Revit-based categories. So these are all of the different types of objects, elements, and data that are available in your Revit model. And over on the right-hand side, we have 3 different columns that allow you to select which type of data are being harvested from each of the different categories. So to describe what these columns are, the first is your data column. That includes anything that is not geometric that would be coming from your model. So that's things that are text-based, things that are numerical, etc., all of those properties that are associated with elements. You'd be able to query your model and gain insights from all of these pieces of data. You'd be able to make tables on Power BI side with this data, but you would not be able to make 2D and 3D visual views in your Power BI report because it wouldn't contain those types of information. That's where these next 2 columns come into play. The 2D data would harvest anything that is line-based or area-based, like a room boundary or a furniture boundary, that you would then be able to have as location GeoJSON based data in your database and use with our Tracer 2D visual or other visuals in Power BI that use location GeoJSON data. The 3D column extracts a data type called GLTF binary that is a mesh data type from your model, and that data can be used with our Tracer 3D visual and Power BI to recreate 3D views of the model. Depending on the types of reports that you're creating in Power BI, the types of analyses that you're doing, you may or may not need 2D data or 3D data. It might be something worth experimenting with or asking us for some guidance and helping you determine. One thing to keep in mind is that a harvest that is only pulling that data category is going to be a faster harvest than one that has every single 2D and 3D element harvested in it. And some of those 2D and 3D elements might not be pertinent to the types of studies that you're doing with the data. So it's something to think about. It also does have an effect on the file size, if that's something that you are concerned about. File storage, especially if you're harvesting large numbers of models. You might have a standard preset that you use that harvests a much smaller amount of that data. And in this case, for example, it's selecting the data column for every single category. So you're getting all of the data that's available in the model. And then for the rooms category specifically, so I search rooms here, it's collecting that 2D and 3D data. So that would allow, if you were creating a report with this preset, with data that's been harvested with this preset, you would be able to use the 2D and 3D tracer visuals to look at the arrangement of rooms in both a 2D layout and a 3D layout. But you wouldn't necessarily see the furniture, or the walls, or the windows, etc., because those categories haven't been selected for the 2D or 3D data extraction. To add a preset below, you just create a preset name. So in this case, I'll use demo. And you could duplicate an existing preset. So this might be a good option if you have one that works really well, but you just want to edit it for a one-off, or if you have one that has practically everything that you need, but you need a different flavor of it, that would be a good option. I will just create it fresh so that you can see what that. Now that that's been created, we can go back to this drop-down menu and select that Demo Delete Me. And within this, we can search for anything that we might want to have additional information on, like walls. Just trying to think of different Revit categories. So we might want to see what the generic models are if we want to do an audit on generic models. Having this bounding box for large meshes option checked, we generally would caution you about this because it might limit the 3D data that's being extracted from the model. But on the other hand, it might save you a lot of file space and time of the harvest itself. Because what this will do is for anything that's a very complex surface, rather than storing the very complex long mesh GLTF binary string, it will store a simple bounding box representation of that object into the database. So you might do a couple of tests to see whether or not that's a good idea for the types of data and study that you're doing with it. But generally, we have this box unchecked when we run a harvest because the 3D elements that we've selected for the preset are things that we would want to see potentially in that 3D visual. So that's one thing to consider as you're moving forward. This detail slider, generally we recommend leaving it at 0.1. That's a pretty low detail phase, and what that does is it pertains to the 3D data that's being extracted, and it controls the smoothness of that mesh object. So the higher up that you go, the more facets that mesh object will get, and it creates a much more complex mesh GLTF string, and has the potential to add additional time and file size to your harvests that are probably not warranted. Usually we find that 0.1 is acceptable. For compression, please leave this set to none. In the past, we did have the option to compress some of this data, and that's something that is being phased out in future versions. So once you've made your changes to the preset, anything that you wanted to add, again, the search bar is a great feature. You could also use this checkbox up at the top to check everything in a column, which is convenient as you're going from page to page. And if you do select this, it does do it for every single page. It's not just the page that you're on. So please be careful when you are selecting these because it selects everything, or deselects everything, which you might not want. You can go ahead then and hit update preset, and it will update and save this preset into the system so that when you go into create a new harvest task, you would be able to select this preset as an option, and it would extract the data according to these instructions. And finally, you're also able to delete a preset. So if there's one that you are no longer using, if it's something that's been copied, updated, and now you have a new version of it, you would just select this trash can icon and delete the preset. Once you delete it, it cannot be retrieved, it can't be undone. So just ensure that you are deleting the correct one, make sure that the correct one is visible in this dialog box, and hit delete.